The universe was vast and unknowable, filled with dark corners and bright stars, ancient empires, and strange alien species. Amongst all the chaos and wonder, Earth had long been considered a small, insignificant, in the grand tapestry of the cosmos. The humans, though resilient and resourceful, were but a speck in a galaxy teeming with civilizations older and more powerful. Yet, in their smallness, humanity had something that no one else had, a fiercely stubborn will to survive, a resourcefulness that defied the odds, and an indomitable belief that they could achieve greatness. The Galactic Senate, a coalition of hundreds of worlds, had long dismissed the Earthlings. They were seen as primitive, as little more than a curiosity, their technology still a few hundred years behind the galactic curve. But there was one faction within the Senate that had taken an interest in Earth, and that faction was not interested in the humans' development as allies. No, they saw potential for something much darker. On the edge of known space, a fleet of ships was gathering. The Zarians, a predatory species from the Scythe Nebula, had set their sights on Earth. Their dark ships, shaped like jagged obsidian teeth, were a symbol of terror throughout the galaxy. Their military prowess was unmatched, and they had destroyed entire planets in their wake. They were feared by even the most powerful empires, and for good reason. No one had ever successfully repelled them. The Zarians were coming for Earth, and the Galactic Senate, despite its vast influence, had done nothing to stop them. Captain Rachel Hunter stood on the bridge of the Calypso, Earth's flagship in the Galactic Defense League, watching the stars streak by as the ship made its way through the void. She was the kind of leader who didn't take orders well. Her commanders had often said she was reckless, but that recklessness had served her well in many situations. Now, as the leader of Earth's fleet, she was on her way to a diplomatic summit with the Galactic Senate. It was meant to be a routine affair, one where Earth would present its case for increased military support, but Rachel knew it would not be that simple. "We're approaching the meeting point, Captain," said Lieutenant Jayla Quinlan, standing at the navigation console. Rachel nodded, her gaze still fixed on the endless stretch of space before her. She had seen the reports, heard the rumors, and despite the overwhelming silence from the Senate, she knew something was wrong. She had a gut feeling that Earth would soon be tested in a way it had never been before. "Any updates from the Senate?" Rachel asked, turning to her communications officer, Lieutenant Eli Harrow. "Nothing yet, Captain," Eli replied, his voice tinged with concern. "But there's been a noticeable increase in encrypted traffic from their command centers. It's almost like they're bracing for something." Rachel's brow furrowed. She had learned over the years to trust her instincts, and her gut was telling her that Earth's time was running out. She had no proof, not yet, but something about this felt wrong. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared, and the lights on the bridge flickered. Rachel's head snapped toward the control panel. The alert was unmistakable. "Captain," Eli said urgently, "we've just detected a Zarian fleet, directly on course for Earth." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. The Zarians were here. It wasn't a warning, it wasn't a drill. This was happening. "How many ships?" Rachel asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "At least 50 warships, Captain," Eli replied, his fingers flying over his console. "They're fully armed and on approach at high speed." Rachel's mind raced. The Zarians had always been a threat, but until now, they had only lurked at the edges of known space. There had been whispers, rumors about their intentions, but Earth had always believed the galaxy would protect them. Now, the Senate's inaction had left them vulnerable, exposed, and isolated. "We need to warn Earth," Rachel said, her voice firm. "Get us in contact with command. I want every available ship scrambled. We're going to need everything we've got." The Calypso surged forward as Rachel gave the order, her hands gripping the console in front of her. The next few hours would be critical. Earth's very survival depended on how quickly they could rally and organize their defenses. "Captain," Jayla spoke up, her tone steady but filled with a hint of worry. "What do we know about the Zarians' tactics? Have we had any encounters with them before?" Rachel shook her head. "No direct encounters, but we've heard enough to know how ruthless they are. They strike quickly, without warning, and without mercy. We've seen the damage they've caused. Entire planets reduced to nothing but ash. Jayla's eyes widened in realization. Are we prepared for something like that? Can we even stand a chance against them? Rachel hesitated. The truth was, Earth wasn't ready for a war of this scale. Their fleet was small, their technology, while advanced, was still no match for the Zarians' sheer power. But there was one thing Earth had that the Zarians didn't: ingenuity. Humanity had a knack for finding unexpected solutions in the face of overwhelming odds. And Rachel, despite the overwhelming fear that gnawed at her, knew that she had to find a way to make Earth's small fleet count. "We'll make them underestimate us," she said, her voice determined. "We'll fight dirty if we have to. This isn't just about brute force, it's about outthinking them." As the Calypso entered the final stretch of its journey toward the Senate's meeting station, Rachel's mind was already racing through possible strategies. Every human in the fleet would need to use their creativity, their resourcefulness, and their unpredictability. They couldn't fight the Zarians head-on with brute strength, but if they could catch them off guard, if they could force the Zarians into a situation where their fearsome reputation didn't guarantee victory, there might be a chance. But even as Rachel steeled herself for what was to come, she couldn't shake the nagging thought that the Zarians' arrival was only part of a much larger plan. Earth had been forgotten for far too long, and now, it was caught in a deadly game between the galaxy's powerful players. The question remained, would the humans' desperate hope for survival be enough to defy the odds? As the Calypso neared the Senate station, Rachel's communicator beeped again. This time, it was an urgent message from Earth's High Command. "Captain Hunter," the voice of General Stevens crackled over the comms, "we've just received intel. The Zarians are not just targeting Earth. They're planning to take out our military infrastructure first, cutting off any possibility of resistance. We've got less than an hour before they reach the planet's orbit. What are your orders?" Rachel's pulse quickened. "We'll hold the line as long as we can," she said. "Prepare to initiate defense protocols. I'll be in contact with you shortly. Get every ship we can out there." As the communication cut off, Rachel turned to her crew. The stakes had just become unimaginably high. They were no longer just preparing for a diplomatic meeting, they were preparing for an invasion, a fight that would test every ounce of their resolve. But even as the Calypso approached the Senate station, the bridge crew knew deep down that the galaxy had made one critical mistake: it had underestimated humanity. Earth's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its fleet. It was its people. And Rachel Hunter would make sure the universe learned just what that meant. "You said." The Calypso jolted, a harsh vibration running through the hull as alarms screamed across the bridge. Rachel Hunter barely flinched. She had already been preparing herself for the chaos that was about to unfold, but the suddenness of it still caught her off guard. "Impact!" Lieutenant Eli Harrow shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "They've launched a barrage. Shields holding at 50%. Rachel's heart hammered in her chest as she leaned forward, watching the display on the view screen. Outside, the black void was filled with streaks of fire as Zarian ships moved into attack position, their sleek, jagged forms gleaming against the backdrop of distant stars. In an instant, their intent was clear. They weren't here for a diplomatic meeting. The fleet had arrived, and they intended to destroy everything in their path. "All hands, brace for impact." Rachel barked, her voice commanding even in the face of danger. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers, now." The Calypso shuddered again, a series of explosions rattling the ship as Zarian weapons hammered against the shields. The bridge lights flickered, and the air seemed to hum with the tension of battle. "Captain!" Jayla Quinlan shouted from her station. "We've got enemy fighters incoming, fast, and they're coming in swarms. We can't keep them off long with our current defenses." Rachel's mind raced. Earth's fleet was nowhere near as advanced or numerous as the Zarians, but that didn't mean they were outmatched. Earth had something the Zarians couldn't account for: creativity and the ability to adapt. But would that be enough? "Launch our drones," Rachel ordered. "I want all drone fighters out and engaging those Zarian ships. Coordinate with the Vanguard and Sentinel, tell them to use decoy signals to disrupt their targeting systems. As the order was relayed, the Calypso shuddered again, a direct hit to the starboard side. The impact sent a shockwave through the ship, throwing crew members against their stations. "Status report," Rachel demanded, gritting her teeth against the jolt. "We've lost the outer communication array, Captain," Eli said, eyes glued to his console. "We're on backup power for now. Shields are holding for the moment, but not for long." Rachel nodded grimly. The Calypso was a formidable ship, but it wasn't invincible, and the Zarians had shown no mercy in their assault. They were swift, ruthless, and their tactics were designed to overwhelm even the most seasoned fleets. But there was one thing the Zarians didn't understand: humanity's capacity for unpredictable thinking. "We're not going to win this by playing their game," Rachel said, a thought forming in her mind. "Time to show them how we fight." She turned to her crew, her gaze steely. "Jayla, I want you to work with the engineering team. We need to reroute power from auxiliary systems to the main engines. I want the Calypso moving faster than they can track. Eli, start running false sensor data, make it look like we're breaking apart in random locations, keep them guessing." The crew moved swiftly, executing their orders with military precision, their experience and training kicking in. They had trained for moments like this, moments when the odds seemed impossible. Rachel trusted them. But she knew it wasn't just enough to trust in their skills. They needed to think differently if they were going to have any hope of survival. As Jayla worked with engineering to adjust power flow, Rachel kept an eye on the external view. The Zarian fleet was closing in. The smaller fighter ships began weaving in and out of the Calypso's defensive perimeter, engaging in close-quarters combat with Earth's drones. Rachel's heart sank as she watched the battle unfold. The drones were being overwhelmed. Even with the best tactics, Earth's technology was no match for the sheer firepower of the Zarians. "We need more time," Jayla shouted over the comms. "We're still trying to get the power levels adjusted. The Zarians are already too close." Rachel's mind worked furiously. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. She turned toward Eli. "Can we overload their sensors?" Rachel asked. "Throw off their lock-on ability for a few seconds?" Eli's brow furrowed as he scanned the data. "We might be able to, if we can trigger a surge in the ship's reactor and release a burst of energy from the rear thrusters. It would short-circuit their targeting systems for a few seconds, but it's risky." "Do it," Rachel ordered. "I'll give the command once you're ready." Eli nodded grimly, working quickly to input the necessary commands. The tension in the air was palpable. The Calypso was in grave danger, and every moment counted. Outside, the Zarian ships circled like sharks, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The black holes of the ships gleamed ominously in the cold emptiness of space. It was clear they had been hunting Earth for a long time. This was not some spur-of-the-moment raid. They had planned for this moment with cold precision, calculating every move. Then, just as Eli called out that he was ready, the Calypso lurched once again, this time with a violent force that nearly threw Rachel off her feet. "Status," she barked, adrenaline pumping through her veins. "Direct hit to the engines." Eli shouted. "We've lost the starboard thrusters. We're drifting." Rachel's stomach tightened. They were vulnerable now. The Zarians would be all over them like vultures. Yet there was no time for despair. "Everyone, hold on," Rachel shouted. "Prepare to make evasive maneuvers, keep fighting." A moment of cold silence filled the bridge before Eli's voice broke through. "Captain, we've got one shot at this. I'm triggering the surge now." The Calypso trembled again, and Rachel's stomach churned as she felt the ship's systems overload. For a brief, terrifying instant, everything went black. The lights on the bridge flickered, and a violent shudder ran through the hull. Then, a blinding flash of energy erupted from the rear of the ship, a violent wave of force that slammed through space. The Zarian fleet, caught off guard, staggered as their sensors went haywire. Targets disappeared, reappeared in new locations, and their advanced weapons locked onto false readings. Now! Rachel shouted, as the momentary disorientation caused the Zarians to falter. The Calypso surged forward, pulling away from the gravity well of the Zarian fleet and darting to the left. Eli worked feverishly at his console. We've got a small window before their systems recalibrate. It's now or never. Open fire, Rachel commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. All weapons, take out their lead ship. The Calypso's cannons roared to life, the concentrated energy beams tearing into the lead Zarian vessel. The alien ship staggered, smoke billowing from its exposed hull as it veered off course. The Zarians, momentarily stunned, began to regroup. But Rachel knew this victory was temporary. They had caused chaos, yes, but the real battle was just beginning. The Zarians would not back down this easily, and soon they would recover. Get ready for the next wave, Rachel muttered under her breath, as she gripped the armrest of her seat. This is only the beginning. The crew of the Calypso stood on the edge of survival, but in the heat of the moment, they had proven what Earth was capable of. They had made the Zarians fear them. For the first time, the hunters were unsure. They had underestimated humanity, and that was a mistake they would not soon forget. The battle had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. The Calypso had managed to inflict some damage, but that fleeting moment of victory was already slipping away. The Zarians, though momentarily disoriented, were regaining their composure with terrifying speed. Their ships were designed for war, and their crews were relentless, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force and calculated precision. As Rachel Hunter stood at the helm of her flagship, she felt the weight of the situation crushing her chest. Earth was facing an extinction-level threat, and despite the ingenuity of her crew, they were on the edge of defeat. The Calypso was battered, its engines barely holding together, its shields flickering at dangerously low levels. Even with their evasive maneuvers and sudden bursts of aggression, the Zarian fleet was closing in. "We can't keep this up," Captain Eli Harrow said, his voice strained as he looked up from his console. "The Calypso's energy reserves are critical. We'll have no shields left in 20 minutes, and our main cannons are down to less than 5% power." Rachel's mind raced. Time was running out. The Zarians weren't just fighting to win, they were fighting to annihilate Earth. If they destroyed the Calypso, the fleet would lose its command center, and Earth's forces would fall apart. "We need a plan, and we need it fast," Rachel muttered to herself. The Zarian ships were closing in, their weapons charging. On the view screen, Rachel saw the first wave of assault ships detach from the fleet, their sleek forms darting toward them like a pack of ravenous wolves. With every passing second, their numbers grew, filling the void between the Calypso and the planet. The very sight of them filled Rachel with a cold dread. They were all too aware of humanity's vulnerability. "Incoming fighters, on intercept vector." Jayla Quinlan, the ship's tactical officer, warned. "They're targeting the engines." Rachel swore under her breath, her thoughts a blur of frantic calculations. They couldn't afford to lose their engines. They couldn't afford to lose anything. The Zarians' firepower was overwhelming, their weapons designed to obliterate anything in their path. They were fast, precise, and deadly. "We have to do something they won't expect," Rachel said aloud. "Something bold." "Captain, you've got one chance at this," Eli said, his voice tight with tension. "But it's dangerous. We'll need to overload the reactor core." Rachel shot him a sharp look. "Overload the reactor? That's insane. The ship will." "It's our only shot," Eli interrupted. "If we can time it right, the energy surge will create a massive shockwave, disorienting the Zarian ships long enough for us to make a break for it." Rachel didn't need to hear more. She had already made her decision. If this was the only way to buy them time, it was the only choice they had left. "Set it up," Rachel commanded, her voice unwavering. "Get us into position." Eli nodded, already working feverishly at his console. "It'll take a few minutes to get the reactor to overload." "We'll have to ride it out, Captain." Rachel took a deep breath and turned to Jayla. "What's our status with the fighters? Are they keeping the Zarians distracted?" Jayla's eyes were glued to the tactical display, her mind working through the puzzle of the battle as the Zarian ships closed in. We've got some of their smaller fighters engaged, but there are too many. If we don't pull them off us, they'll swarm us entirely. I can't guarantee the Calypso's safety for long. Understood. Rachel turned back to Eli. How long before the overload is ready? 5 minutes, Eli answered, his voice tinged with worry. Once it hits, the surge will be powerful enough to send a shockwave through the Zarian fleet. But it'll also damage our systems. We won't be able to do much more after that. Then we need to make it count, Rachel said, her resolve hardening. Jayla, I need you to give me everything we've got left. Create a diversion, a decoy. Anything that'll throw off their targeting systems. Jayla hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. Understood, Captain. With the Zarian fleet closing in, the tension aboard the Calypso became unbearable. Every creak of the ship's aging hull felt like the beginning of the end. The Calypso's weapons were offline, and without her engines, they were sitting ducks. But Rachel refused to let fear take over. There was one thing she knew for sure, humans didn't give up easily. We've got one chance, Rachel muttered, mostly to herself. Just one. Outside, the Zarian ships swarmed, their dark, jagged forms cutting through the emptiness of space like a storm of doom. Rachel's eyes narrowed as the approaching fleet locked onto her ship. This was it. Brace for impact, Rachel ordered. The first volley of Zarian fire tore into the Calypso, causing the ship to lurch violently. Sparks flew from several control panels, and the lights flickered, threatening to go out entirely. The hull groaned under the assault, and Rachel could feel the stress on the ship. It was holding, barely, but not for long. How much longer, Eli? Rachel asked, her voice strained but determined. 2 minutes, Eli said through gritted teeth. We'll be ready soon. The Zarians were relentless. Waves of smaller ships darted forward, firing high-energy blasts at the Calypso, sending shockwaves through the ship. Each blast took a chunk out of the Calypso's outer hull, each impact a grim reminder of how little time they had left. Jayla, how's that decoy coming? Rachel asked, gripping the console as the ship shuddered under another barrage. Almost there, Jayla replied, her voice steady despite the chaos. I'm releasing false readings, targeting a position 100 clicks to our right. It should pull a few ships off our tail. Do it, Rachel said, and within seconds, the ship's systems pulsed with a new energy signature. The Zarian sensors momentarily shifted, locking onto the decoy signal. A fraction of their fleet veered off to engage the false target, buying the Calypso a few precious moments. Now! Eli shouted. The ship rattled again as the reactor core surged to life, an intense energy pulse running through the ship. The blast sent a shockwave rippling outward through space. The Zarian ships, caught in the wave, were thrown off course as their systems overloaded. The sudden disorientation sent several ships spiraling out of control, crashing into each other in a chaotic mess of sparks and explosions. Yes! Rachel exclaimed, watching the chaos unfold on the view screen. For a brief moment, the Zarians were in disarray. The Calypso's desperate gamble had worked. But the relief was short-lived. The Zarians were already regaining control. They had lost some ships, but their superior numbers and technology were quickly overcoming the effects of the shockwave. Captain! Eli shouted. We've lost power to the aft shields. We're vulnerable. Rachel's heart raced as the last of their defenses began to fall apart. They couldn't take another hit like that. They had a brief window, a fragile, fleeting moment, but they had to move fast. Engage evasive maneuvers, Rachel barked. Full thrust ahead, we're breaking through the center of their formation. Her crew scrambled to obey, every system groaning under the strain. The ship lurched forward, but it was clear that their chances of escaping the Zarian ambush were slipping away. The Calypso was in the eye of the storm, and every moment felt like a countdown to their inevitable destruction. They had caused chaos, yes, but the Zarians were not easily beaten. They would regroup, adapt, and come for them again. But Rachel had one final card to play. She had just one more chance to make the Zarians understand what it meant to face the full force of humanity's will to survive. The air in the Calypso's bridge was thick with tension. The crew had given everything they had, and now, as the ship's systems flickered and the last of the shields sputtered out, Rachel Hunter felt the heavy weight of the battle press down on her shoulders. They had bought themselves time, yes, but time was running out. The Zarians were regaining their composure faster than they had anticipated. With their overwhelming firepower, it was only a matter of time before the Calypso would be torn apart. Status. Rachel barked, her eyes scanning the consoles in front of her. "We've got enemy ships locking onto us," Captain Eli Harrow reported, his voice strained. The energy surge from the reactor core caused some damage, but they're recovering fast. Our remaining drones are being wiped out one by one. Our weapons are offline, and our engines are barely functional. Rachel nodded grimly, her mind already shifting gears. She had led them this far, and she wouldn't let them die here. Not like this. There had to be a way out. There had to be a way to turn the tide, if only they could exploit the Zarians' arrogance. "Jayla, get me everything you've got," Rachel ordered. "Give me some kind of surprise. We need to hit them hard." Jayla Quinlan didn't hesitate. She worked with urgency, punching in commands on the tactical display. "I'm rerouting auxiliary power to the point defense systems," she said, her fingers flying over the controls. "We might be able to take out some of their smaller ships at least, but we're running on fumes here, Captain." "Understood. But we need more than that. We need a plan that will make them think twice about finishing us off," Rachel replied. The Zarian ships closed in. The larger dreadnoughts circled, their weapons primed, ready to unleash their devastating firepower. And, just beyond them, the smaller, faster ships zipped around, ready to swarm. The Calypso was crippled, but it was still alive. The crew was still alive. Rachel's mind raced, and then a wild thought crossed her mind. It was crazy. It was reckless. It was exactly the kind of thing Earth's enemies would never expect. "Set course for their flagship," she said, her voice low but sure. "What?" Eli and Jayla both said at the same time, staring at her in disbelief. "That's our best shot," Rachel continued, the plan forming in her mind as she spoke. "We're going to take the fight directly to their command ship. If we can breach their flagship's defenses, we can destabilize their command chain. We hit them hard enough, and they might panic, retreat, or break formation." The silence that followed felt like a storm brewing on the horizon. The crew was stunned, but they knew better than to question her now. "Captain," Eli said, after a beat, "you're suggesting we ram the flagship?" Rachel met his gaze. "We'll make it look like an attack, an all-or-nothing move. We hit them fast, then unload everything we have left. If we can get close enough, we might just cripple their command center. If we fail," she paused, "we go down fighting." "Right," Eli replied, determination flashing in his eyes. "Rerouting power to the forward shields. I'll prepare the thrusters for maximum speed. It's going to be tight." Jayla, always the voice of reason, hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Captain, we're down to less than 10% of our energy reserves. If we don't hit them hard, we won't even make it through the first pass." "I know," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the looming fear. "But we don't have a choice anymore." Without another word, Jayla activated the ship's forward thrusters, and the Calypso lurched, its remaining engines firing with all the power they could muster. The ship groaned, its hull straining against the damage it had already sustained. Outside, the Zarian flagship loomed like a mountain, and in the distance, the smaller attack ships formed into tight formations, preparing to rip them apart. "Set course," Rachel commanded, watching as the ship's systems locked onto the target. The ship shot forward, its damaged engines sputtering as they tried to push the Calypso through space. The Zarians hadn't expected such a bold move, and for a moment, Rachel saw their ships falter. The ones guarding the flagship hesitated, confused by the Calypso's aggressive approach. "Now!" Rachel shouted. Fire everything we have. Weapons, point defense systems, make them regret this. The Calypso opened fire with everything it had left. Blasts of concentrated energy shot from every available weapon, targeting the nearest Zarian fighters. One by one, the alien ships were torn apart, the flashes of energy lighting up the dark void of space. But the flagship was still out of reach. The Zarians quickly adjusted their tactics, focusing their fire on the Calypso, pushing it further off course. The ship shuddered violently as the enemy weapons pummeled them from every direction. "We're taking too much damage," Eli shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "We can't keep this up for long." Rachel gritted her teeth, her heart pounding as she focused on the view screen. They were getting closer, but they were running out of time. "Jayla," she barked. "Can we force their shields to drop?" Jayla looked up, calculating the odds in her mind. "There's a chance. But we'd need to hit them from multiple angles, coordinated fire. If we can get them to engage all their shield generators at once, we might just crack them." Rachel's mind raced. "Do it," she commanded. The Calypso veered sharply, its remaining thrusters firing in bursts as it dodged incoming fire and positioned itself for the final assault. The bridge shook under another barrage, but Rachel held firm, eyes locked on the Zarian flagship. "Ready!" Jayla called. "Now, fire!" Rachel ordered. In a single, unified roar, the Calypso's remaining weapons fired, hitting the Zarian flagship in a series of explosive impacts. The massive ship's shields flickered violently, cracking under the combined assault. The alien vessel shuddered as sections of its outer hull exploded, sending debris careening through space. For a moment, the Zarians were caught off guard, disoriented by the ferocity of the attack. "Yes!" Eli shouted. "We've done it. Shields are down." Rachel didn't hesitate. "All forward, ram them. Full speed ahead." The Calypso surged forward, its remaining power coursing through the engines. The ship shuddered violently as the distance closed between them and the flagship. Zarian ships opened fire, but the Calypso pushed through the storm of incoming blasts, shields flickering but holding. And then, impact. The Calypso crashed into the Zarian flagship with a bone-rattling explosion, a deafening clang as their hulls collided. The force of the impact sent shockwaves rippling through the Zarian ship, and in an instant, chaos erupted. Zarian crews scrambled to respond, but the Calypso had already delivered the fatal blow. "Now's our chance," Rachel shouted. "All crew, prepare for boarding." In the chaos of the collision, Rachel's crew acted with precision, boarding shuttles and using every available drone to storm the Zarian flagship. The Zarian forces were in disarray, their command structure shattered by the sudden attack. With the Calypso's final push, Earth had managed to deliver a devastating blow to their enemies. In the heart of the enemy fleet, surrounded by the ruins of their own command ship, the crew of the Calypso held their ground. The war was far from over, but humanity had proven one undeniable truth: they would not be cowed. They would fight back, no matter the odds. As the battle raged on, Rachel stood tall, her eyes fixed on the ruined flagship. The Zarians had learned what it meant to face humanity, and they would never forget it. The universe would know fear. Fear of Earth's resilience. Fear of humanity's unyielding will to survive. And this was only the beginning.